Let's slow things down. You don't have to listen too closely, just let your mind wander while we talk about something incredibly unimportant. In the bustling, sun-drenched realm of ancient Egypt, a young girl named Cleopatra was busy defying expectations like it was her personal hobby. Born in 69 BC to the Ptolemaic dynasty, Cleopatra was never going to be your average Egyptian princess. Sure, she had the royal bloodline tracing all the way back to Ptolemy I, one of Alexander the Great's generals. But unlike those who might spend their privileged youth dabbling in courtly distractions, she was more interested in languages and politics than in the latest Nile fashion trends. Cleopatra wasn't just any linguistically gifted monarch-to-be, she was practically a linguistic prodigy. By the time she was ready to step into the full glare of the political spotlight, she could speak at least 9 languages. Yes, 9. That's like being able to order a falafel in 9 different dialects, while the rest of us struggle with high school Spanish. This wasn't just a quirky talent, though, it was a savvy political tool. Speaking directly with her subjects in their native tongue, be they Egyptians, Greeks, Hebrews, or Persians, she could charm, persuade, and negotiate without a translator mucking things up or losing the nuance. In a world dominated by men who barely stepped beyond their own linguistic comfort zones, Cleopatra's command of languages was her secret weapon. While the Ptolemaic dynasty was Greek in origin, they ruled Egypt with a relentless grip. The fun little twist? Most of Cleopatra's predecessors couldn't be bothered to speak Egyptian, the language of the very land they ruled. Cleopatra broke that mold with all the subtlety of a chariot crash, becoming the first of her line to embrace the Egyptian language. This didn't just make her relatable, it made her revolutionary. Now, let's talk strategy. Cleopatra, even as a teenager, was no stranger to the brutal game of dynastic politics. She had a front-row seat to the family drama that made Game of Thrones look like a friendly family board game night. Her father, Ptolemy VI, had a reign marked by instability and Roman interference. He was like a puppet with strings pulled from across the Mediterranean. Rome was the looming giant, casting a shadow over Egypt, and Cleopatra was taking notes. She understood that to navigate this complex political landscape, she'd need more than just a crown, she'd need allies, and she'd need to play the long game. Her first brush with Roman politics was like a sneak peek into the theatrical drama that would define her reign. Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great were the rock stars of the Roman Republic, and Cleopatra was smart enough to realize that aligning with the right Roman giant could secure her throne. When her father fled to Rome amid a rebellion, Cleopatra witnessed firsthand the power dynamics at play. Rome wasn't just a distant threat, it was a neighbor with a penchant for meddling in Egyptian affairs. This was not a time for passive rulers, it was a time for chess players, and Cleopatra was learning to be a grandmaster. As Cleopatra ascended the throne, the political climate was as turbulent as the Nile during flood season. Her initial reign was marked by the need to co-rule with her brother Ptolemy XIII, a setup that was about as stable as a 3-legged chair. While history often romanticizes Cleopatra as the seductress of powerful men, it's crucial to remember that her real allure was her intelligence, her cunning, and her ability to outmaneuver her rivals. Her rise to power wasn't just about beauty, it was about brains and boldness. Despite the familial power struggles, Cleopatra's early reign was also a time of great economic potential. Egypt, with its fertile lands and strategic location, was a jewel in the ancient world's crown. Cleopatra's Egypt was rich in grain, a crucial asset in a world where food was as good as currency. Understanding her country's economic strength, Cleopatra's policies aimed to stabilize and strengthen Egypt's economy, ensuring that her kingdom would remain a vital player in the Mediterranean. This was no small feat in a period when alliances were about as permanent as sandcastles. All these factors set the stage for her legendary relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But before the love stories and epic dramas, there was a young woman who, against all odds, carved out her place in a male-dominated world. Cleopatra was more than a queen, she was a strategist, a linguist, and a ruler who knew that power came not from titles alone, but from the ability to adapt and thrive amid the chaos of history. So, as Cleopatra navigated the complex waters of early Roman politics, she was doing more than securing her throne. She was crafting a legacy that would endure through the ages. The stories of her affairs may capture the popular imagination, but it's her ambition and intellect that made her an indelible figure in history. If Cleopatra was going to cement her place in history, she needed to make her next move with all the precision of a master chess player. Enter Julius Caesar, the Roman titan who was as much a force of nature as the tempestuous Mediterranean itself. Now, let's be real. The story of Cleopatra and Caesar often gets painted with the broad strokes of a Hollywood epic. Cue the sweeping soundtrack and longing glances across a marble court. But let's put down the romance novel and pick up a history book, because their alliance was about as starry-eyed as a business merger. By the time Cleopatra and Caesar crossed paths, the Romans had their eyes greedily set on Egypt's bounty of grain and strategic position. Egypt was the Mediterranean's breadbasket, and Rome had a carb craving like no other. For Cleopatra, tying Egypt's fortunes to Rome wasn't just about survival, it was about securing her throne and ensuring Egypt's continued prosperity. And Caesar? Well, he was a man who knew that a queen in his corner could be more valuable than a legion of soldiers. But before we dive into the boardroom tactics masquerading as a love story, we've got to address the rug incident. Ah, yes, the legend of Cleopatra rolled up in a rug and smuggled into Caesar's presence. It's a tale as old as time, or at least as old as a good marketing gimmick. The reality? Whether or not Cleopatra actually played the role of human burrito is up for debate. What we do know is that she was a master of dramatic entrances. The rug story, regardless of its factuality, symbolizes her ability to seize attention and control the narrative. Cleopatra understood the power of a great first impression, and if that involved a little myth-making, so be it. Now, on to the heart of the matter, the political chess game between Cleopatra and Caesar. Their partnership was like an ancient world version of House of Cards, where every move was calculated and every alliance had a price tag. Cleopatra needed Caesar's military might to reclaim her throne after being ousted by her brother, Ptolemy XIII, the kid brother who had the gall to think he could outmaneuver his sister. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. By aligning with Caesar, Cleopatra wasn't just getting a military ally, she was getting a Roman endorsement, a stamp of approval from the very power that could make or break her reign. And let's not forget the economic implications. With Caesar's backing, Cleopatra could stabilize Egypt's economy, ensuring those precious grain shipments kept flowing to Rome. It was a win-win situation. Caesar got the glory of restoring a monarch and the promise of grain shipments, while Cleopatra secured her position and Egypt's prosperity. For Caesar, the alliance was a means to an end. Egypt's wealth was a juicy prize, and its queen was a savvy partner who could help him achieve his political goals. Plus, let's face it, having a queen like Cleopatra on your side didn't exactly hurt Caesar's image. The union of two of the ancient world's most formidable figures was a headline-grabbing coup that sent ripples through the Mediterranean. The economic implications of this alliance were monumental. Cleopatra's Egypt, with its rich agricultural resources, was like the Amazon of the ancient world, a powerhouse of trade and wealth. By securing her throne with Caesar's help, Cleopatra not only reclaimed her crown, but also revitalized Egypt's economy. Under her rule, the country's coffers were replenished, and its status as a key player in the Mediterranean was restored. It was a classic case of power politics. Align with the right players, and you could rewrite the rules of the game. As for the romance, well, while the tabloids of antiquity, had they existed, would have had a field day, the reality was more transactional than torrid. Cleopatra and Caesar shared a partnership of mutual benefit, their relationship more boardroom than boudoir. But the allure of their connection, the idea of two titans entwined in both politics and passion, has a certain mythic quality that continues to captivate the imagination. In Cleopatra's grand strategy, her alliance with Caesar was a masterstroke. It wasn't about love, it was about leverage, about ensuring that Egypt remained a sovereign power despite the looming shadow of Roman dominance. And while the romantic narrative makes for great storytelling, it's the cold, hard facts of political necessity that truly shaped their relationship. So, as Cleopatra made her moves on the chessboard of history, she was doing so with the cunning and foresight of a ruler who understood that power was more than mere titles and lands. It was about alliances, about economic strength, and, most importantly, about playing the long game. And in that game, Cleopatra was a player unlike any other. As we leave this chapter, remember, when it comes to Cleopatra and Caesar, the truth is far more intriguing than fiction. Stay tuned, because the next act in Cleopatra's saga will be just as riveting, as she navigates the treacherous waters of power, politics, and the ever-watchful eyes of Rome. Just as Cleopatra was riding high on her alliance with Julius Caesar, the Roman world was about to flip the script with all the subtlety of a plot twist in a soap opera. In 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated in the Senate, stabbed 23 times, because apparently Roman senators didn't believe in half measures. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra's carefully laid plans were suddenly teetering like a Jenga tower in an earthquake. Now, you might think this would be the part where Cleopatra retreats to a dark corner, nursing her wounds and plotting revenge like an ancient world's Lady Macbeth. But no, Cleopatra was more of a when life gives you lemons, build the lemonade empire kind of ruler. The political landscape in Rome was now as chaotic as a toga party gone wrong, and Cleopatra saw opportunity in the chaos. The power vacuum left by Caesar's death sparked a civil war, pitting Caesar's heir Octavian against Mark Antony and the rest of Rome's power-hungry elite. Cleopatra, ever the strategic mastermind, knew she needed to hedge her bets. But she also understood that Egypt's stability was as fragile as a sandcastle at high tide, and for that she needed a fleet. Enter the Queen's naval ambitions. Cleopatra wasn't just about playing defence, she was all in on expanding her influence across the Mediterranean. Her fleet wasn't just a bunch of glorified rowboats, it was a formidable seafaring force, a veritable floating armoury of ships. She knew controlling the sea lanes meant holding the keys to power. And in a world where trade routes were the veins and arteries of empires, Cleopatra was about to become the Mediterranean's cardiologist. But let's get to the juicy part, Cleopatra's encounter with Mark Antony. Imagine the scene, Antony, the rugged Roman general with a reputation for both military prowess and personal excess, arrives in Tarsus, expecting Cleopatra to come begging for her kingdom's survival. Instead, Cleopatra makes her entrance with all the theatricality of a rock star on a comeback tour. She sails up the Cydnus River, reclining on a golden barge, sails billowing in the wind, while her attendants scatter rose petals. It was like an ancient version of a Beyoncé concert. Antony was floored, not just by the spectacle, but by Cleopatra herself. Forget the myth of her legendary beauty. It was her intellect, wit, and charisma that really knocked him off his sandals. Cleopatra knew how to make an impression, and Antony was hooked before he'd even heard her speak. They met, they dined, and Antony was drawn into Cleopatra's web, not by seduction, but by a compelling combination of political acumen and personal charm. Their alliance was sealed not in whispered sweet nothings, but in hard political currency. Cleopatra needed Antony's military support to secure her throne and fend off any Roman ambitions on Egyptian soil. Antony, in turn, recognized the strategic advantage of aligning with Egypt's queen. She offered resources, a stable grain supply, and a strategic position that could be crucial in his power struggle against Octavian. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. Antony's Roman legions, combined with Cleopatra's naval, might make them the power couple of the ancient world. But let's not get carried away with the romantic notion of Antony and Cleopatra as star-crossed lovers. Their partnership was built on mutual benefit, a calculated alliance as much as anything else. And while we're busting myths, let's tackle the Cleopatra beauty story. Was she the Helen of Troy of her time, with a face to launch 1,000 ships? Not quite. We have coins and busts that depict her as possessing strong, distinctive features. Certainly not the airbrushed goddess of Hollywood legend, but her allure lay in her brilliance, her ability to converse as easily about philosophy and politics as she could manage a kingdom. Cleopatra's real beauty was her mind, a weapon sharper than any gladius. Economically, Cleopatra was no slouch either. She recognized that Egypt's wealth lay in its agriculture and trade. Under her reign, the economy didn't just survive, it flourished. By leveraging Egypt's grain surplus, she effectively held a bargaining chip that was as powerful as any army. The Mediterranean world ran on grain, and Cleopatra controlled a substantial portion of that supply. Her economic policies ensured that Egypt remained not just a key player in the region, but an indispensable one. Of course, aligning with Antony wasn't without its risks. Rome was a hornet's nest of political intrigue, and Octavian was not about to let Antony and Cleopatra enjoy their alliance unchallenged. Octavian was as shrewd as he was ambitious, and he understood the power of propaganda. he painted Cleopatra as the villainous foreign queen, the seductress who had ensnared a Roman general. The narrative was less about reality and more about politics, but it stuck. Cleopatra became the femme fatale of Roman imagination, a role she never auditioned for but played with aplomb. As Cleopatra and Antony's partnership deepened, so did their political and military ambitions. They envisioned a new world order where Rome and Egypt would stand united, a Mediterranean powerhouse under their joint leadership. For Cleopatra, this was more than a strategic alliance. It was a vision of an empire where Egypt could regain its former glory. In the grand game of power and politics, Cleopatra was not just a player but a master. Her ability to navigate the complex, often treacherous waters of Roman and Egyptian politics was nothing short of legendary. As she continued to strengthen her position, it became clear that Cleopatra was more than just a queen. She was a force of nature, a ruler who understood that true power came not from the throne, but from the mind. As we leave this chapter, remember that Cleopatra's story is far from over. The stakes are rising, and the tension between Rome and Egypt is reaching a boiling point. Cleopatra's legacy, built on intellect and ambition, is poised to face its greatest challenges. Stay tuned, because the next act in Cleopatra's saga promises to be as riveting as it is dramatic, with the fate of empires hanging in the balance. As Cleopatra continued to navigate the tumultuous waters of Roman and Egyptian politics, the stakes were undeniably high. The tension between Rome and Egypt was like a pressure cooker set to explode, and at the heart of it was the enigmatic trio of Cleopatra, Mark Antony, and Octavian. Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted heir, was not about to let Antony and Cleopatra's Mediterranean dream go unchallenged. Octavian was a man with a plan, or more accurately, a propaganda machine, and he wielded it with all the finesse of a tabloid editor on a sensationalism spree. Octavian understood the power of public perception better than most. With Cleopatra and Antony as his prime targets, he unleashed a smear campaign that would make modern political attack ads look like polite dinner conversation. Cleopatra was cast as the villainous foreign queen, the exotic temptress who had supposedly bewitched Antony, turning him against his Roman roots. She was painted as the embodiment of Eastern decadence, an image that was as much fantasy as reality. Meanwhile, Antony was portrayed as a Roman general gone rogue, seduced by his Egyptian paramour into betraying his homeland. It was a narrative cooked up to ignite Roman nationalism and rally the masses against the so-called Eastern menace. The propaganda war was brutal, and Octavian was relentless. He circulated coins showing Cleopatra as a sinister seductress, with Antony depicted as her bewitched consort. It was a tale as old as time, the foreign femme fatale leading a good man astray. But the truth was far more complex. Cleopatra and Antony's alliance was built not on seduction, but on shared goals and mutual benefit. They were partners in a political and military endeavour, not the star-crossed lovers of Octavian's fevered imagination. As the propaganda machine churned, the stage was set for the showdown of the century, the Battle of Actium. This wasn't just any battle. It was a naval engagement of epic proportions, a clash that would decide the fate of empires. On September 2nd, 31 BC, the forces of Antony and Cleopatra faced off against Octavian's fleet off the western coast of Greece. Antony commanded a force of about 500 ships, many of them large quinqueremes, while Octavian's admiral Agrippa led a fleet of around 400 ships, equipped with the latest in naval technology. The Battle of Actium was more than just a military engagement, it was a logistical nightmare. Antony's fleet was burdened with the challenge of manoeuvring larger, slower ships against Agrippa's nimbler vessels. Moreover, supplies were running low, and morale among Antony's troops was shaky at best. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, had brought her own fleet into the fray, but the odds were stacked against them. In the heat of battle, Antony's forces found themselves outmanoeuvred by Agrippa's superior tactics. The turning point came when Cleopatra, seeing the tide turning against them, made the fateful decision to withdraw her fleet. Some say it was a calculated retreat, a move to preserve her naval strength for another day. Others claim it was an act of desperation, a bid to save what she could from the unfolding disaster. Regardless, Antony, witnessing Cleopatra's departure, made the fateful choice to follow her, an act that sealed their fate. The fallout from Actium was catastrophic for Antony and Cleopatra. Their forces disintegrated, and with them, their dreams of a Mediterranean empire. Octavian's victory was complete, and he wasted no time in capitalizing on his triumph. He declared Antony and Cleopatra enemies of Rome, using their defeat as a rallying cry to consolidate his power. Misinformation and public perception played a crucial role in their downfall. Octavian's narrative of the foreign queen and her Roman puppet had resonated with the Roman populace, turning public opinion firmly against Antony and Cleopatra. In the court of public opinion, they were judged and found wanting, a testament to the enduring power of propaganda in shaping history. But let's pause for a moment and consider the economic implications of this defeat. Cleopatra's Egypt, the breadbasket of the ancient world, was now vulnerable. With its grain supply compromised, the economic stability of the region was at risk. Octavian understood this and moved swiftly to take control of Egypt, ensuring that its resources would flow into Roman coffers. The economic impact was profound, reshaping the balance of power in the Mediterranean. For Cleopatra and Antony, the defeat at Actium was the beginning of the end. Their forces in disarray, their reputations in tatters, they retreated to Alexandria, where they would make their last stand. The dream of a united empire under their rule had shattered like a dropped amphora, leaving them with nothing but the stark reality of their situation. As we draw this chapter to a close, it's important to remember that the story of Cleopatra and Antony is more than just a tale of romance and tragedy. It's a complex narrative of power, politics, and the human drive to shape destiny. Their defeat was not just a military loss, but a testament to the enduring power of perception and the influence of propaganda. Octavian's victory at Actium was not just a triumph of arms, but a masterstroke of political manipulation. And as we move forward, we will see how Cleopatra's legacy, though marred by defeat, continues to resonate through the ages, a testament to her enduring power and influence. Stay tuned, because the saga of Cleopatra and Antony is far from over, and the next act promises to be as compelling as the last. With their dreams crumbled into ancient dust, Cleopatra and Antony retreated to Alexandria, the city that had once been their glittering capital. Now it felt more like a gilded cage, surrounded by enemies and haunted by the spectre of defeat. Octavian was closing in, and the clock was ticking faster than the Nile receding after a flood. In August of 30 BC, Octavian's forces arrived at the gates of Alexandria, ready to deliver the final blow. For Antony, the end came with the clatter of a Roman sword. Faced with the inevitability of defeat, he chose to fall on his own sword, dying in Cleopatra's arms. It was a departure as dramatic as his life, a tragic full stop on a sentence written in ambition and miscalculation. Cleopatra, witnessing Antony's demise, was left to face the cold, hard reality of Octavian's triumph. And here's where history takes a detour into myth. The story of Cleopatra's death is one of antiquity's most enduring legends, complete with a venomous snake and the drama of a Shakespearean tragedy. The tale goes that Cleopatra, rather than face the humiliation of being paraded through Rome as a war trophy, took her own life with the bite of an asp. Now, before we get carried away with visions of Cleopatra playing Pied Piper to a basket of snakes, let's delve into the facts, or the lack thereof. The asp story is tantalizingly theatrical, but historical evidence is as sparse as a desert rain. Ancient sources like Plutarch and Suetonius mention the snake, but their accounts were crafted long after Cleopatra's death, when narratives were already swirling like sand in a breeze. Modern scholars suggest that Cleopatra might have used poison instead, probably a fast-acting concoction, given her penchant for efficiency. Whether by snake or by potion, Cleopatra's death was a final act of defiance, a refusal to become a piece in Octavian's victory parade. Cleopatra's demise marked the end of an era, the closing chapter of both her reign and the Ptolemaic dynasty. With her death, Egypt fell into Roman hands like a ripe fig, becoming a province of the burgeoning empire. Octavian, now Augustus, the first Roman emperor, turned Egypt into Rome's personal grain silo. The economic ramifications were enormous. Egypt's grain became a crucial resource for feeding Rome's burgeoning population, reinforcing Augustus's power base. Economically, this was a masterstroke for Rome, but a grim downfall for a once independent Egypt. But let's not brush past Cleopatra's legacy like a forgotten footnote. Cleopatra was more than a ruler, she was a symbol, a beacon of female power in a world that preferred its women silent and shadowed. Her life was a testament to the power of intellect over brute force, of diplomacy over war. Cleopatra wielded her mind like a weapon, and her rule was marked by an unwavering commitment to Egypt's prosperity. Her economic policies ensured that, even in the face of Roman aggression, Egypt remained a formidable player on the Mediterranean chessboard. What makes Cleopatra's story so irresistible is the blend of myth and reality. The romantic allure of her life, the love affairs, the dramatic death, often overshadows the political machinations and economic savvy that defined her reign. But it's in this blend that her true legacy lies. Cleopatra understood the power of narrative, and she used it to her advantage, crafting her image as a ruler not just of lands, but of stories. As we look back on her life, it's clear that Cleopatra's greatest achievement was her ability to play a man's game in a man's world and win, even if only for a time. She was a queen who defied convention, who spoke the language of power fluently and with flair. Her reign was a masterclass in leadership, a lesson in the art of wielding influence. Cleopatra's life offers us lessons that resonate across the ages. In a world where perception often trumps reality, her story reminds us of the power of narrative to shape history. She was a ruler who understood that while empires might rise and fall, stories endure. Cleopatra's legend, crafted in equal parts from truth and myth, continues to captivate because it speaks to the eternal human drama of ambition, power, and the relentless pursuit of legacy. As we wrap up this saga, let's remember Cleopatra not just as a queen, but as a strategist, a linguist, and a pioneer in the art of self-reinvention. Her life was a complex tapestry of politics and passion, and her legacy is a reminder that history is not just a series of events, but a collection of stories we choose to tell. Cleopatra's story endures because it reflects the intricate dance between power and perception, a dance that continues to shape our world today. And so, as the curtain falls on Cleopatra's tale, we're left with a sense of awe at the enduring power of a queen who, against all odds, carved her name into the annals of history. It's dawn on the vast Eurasian steppe, and you're already awake because, let's face it, being a Mongol horse archer doesn't come with a snooze button. The early morning sun is casting a golden glow over the endless sea of grass. But before you get poetic about it, there's work to do. Your first job? Tend to your most valuable possession, your horse. This isn't just any old equine. This is your partner in crime, your ticket to glory, and, if we're being brutally honest, your survival tool in a world where speed and mobility are your best friends. Now, let's talk horse care. You're not just brushing down a majestic steed, you're basically maintaining your ancient world Ferrari. This horse isn't just some barnyard buddy. We're talking about a beast capable of covering up to 160 kilometers a day if the need arises. That's like riding from New York to Philadelphia and back, all before dinner. Your horse is an integral part of your life, not just a mode of transport. It's valued more than gold, literally. Horse trading is a serious business, and a well-bred steed could set someone back a small fortune. Think of it as the Mongol equivalent of a high-stakes Wall Street investment. Next up, let's have a chat about your bow. Forget those Robin Hood-style longbows or the kind you might have seen in a medieval fair. This is the Mongol recurve bow, a masterpiece of craftsmanship and engineering. Made from a composite of wood, horn, and sinew, it might look small, but it packs a punch. This baby can shoot arrows accurately up to 500 meters. That's 5 football fields, end to end. In the hands of a skilled archer like yourself, it's a weapon of mass devastation. You might be a one-person artillery unit, but instead of cannonballs, it's arrows raining down on your enemies. The bow is more than just a weapon, it's a symbol of your identity. The craftsmanship required to make one is staggering. It takes months to construct a single bow, with each layer meticulously glued and bound together. The sinew gives it flexibility, while the horn provides compression strength. So when you're polishing your bow in the morning light, you're not just gearing up for the day, you're holding the product of centuries of innovation and expertise. Now, while we're on the topic of romanticizing life as a Mongol warrior, let's debunk some myths. Sure, the tales of fearless warriors galloping across the plains might sound like something out of an epic saga, but life isn't all heroic charges and glorious battles. It's mostly about survival, keeping your gear in shape and ensuring that your horse doesn't decide to wander off into the horizon without you. The steppe is as unforgiving as it is beautiful, and keeping your wits about you is essential. And let's not forget the economic side of things. Your existence isn't just about raiding and conquering, it's deeply tied to the trade networks sprawling across Asia. The Mongol Empire didn't just conquer land, it controlled the Silk Road, the internet of the medieval world. This meant access to goods, information, and the kind of wealth that built cities and toppled empires. Your role as a horse archer is part of a larger economic machine that stretches from the Black Sea to the Pacific Ocean. So, as you finish up your morning routine and prepare for the day ahead, remember that you're part of something much larger. You're not just a cog in the war machine, you're a vital link in a chain that connects continents. Your horse and bow aren't just tools of war, they're symbols of the ingenuity and adaptability that define the Mongol way of life. As you mount your horse and ride out onto the steppe, you're carrying with you the legacy of a people who shaped the world in ways that are still felt today. And that, my friend, is something worth getting out of bed for. As you and your trusty steed merge into the ranks of your comrades, it's time to swap the morning calm for something more akin to controlled chaos training. The sun's climbing higher, casting long shadows that dance across the steppe like spirits of warriors past. There's no cafe to grab a latte, but who needs caffeine when you've got the adrenaline of a Mongol training session? The clatter of hooves and the snap of bowstrings fill the air, punctuated by the barked commands of your leaders. Welcome to the Mongol boot camp, where leisurely doesn't exist in the vocabulary. Now, let's talk tactics. The Mongols didn't just wander into battle hoping for the best. They were the medieval equivalent of a well-oiled military-industrial complex. Under the leadership of visionaries like Genghis Khan, they transformed warfare from a brute force endeavor into a symphony of strategy and precision. Forget the clumsy charges of armored knights. The Mongol approach was all about mobility, adaptability, and, dare I say, a touch of psychological warfare. Your training isn't just about hitting a target, it's about hitting it while galloping at full speed and then vanishing into the horizon before anyone can say, "Did anyone get the number of that horse?" Discipline was the secret sauce. These training sessions weren't just about honing individual skills, but about perfecting the art of moving as a single, deadly organism. You see, Mongol warfare wasn't a free-for-all. It was a choreographed performance where every warrior knew their role. In essence, you're learning to be the ultimate team player, which might sound like a corporate pep talk, but in this case, the stakes are a bit higher than quarterly profits. Your life and the fate of empires hang in the balance. And here's a fun fact. The Mongols were pioneers of the feigned retreat. It's like the military version of the old rope, a dope. You'd pretend to flee, luring your enemies into overextending themselves, then bam, you turn around and bring the pain. This tactic was so effective that it became a signature move. Think of it as the Mongol Empire's greatest hit, topping the charts of strategic warfare playlists. But let's not get carried away with the romanticized image of the invincible Mongol warrior. Sure, they dominated on the battlefield more often than not, but invincibility? That's a myth. The Mongols faced their share of challenges, from harsh weather to logistical nightmares. Imagine trying to coordinate an army across thousands of kilometers without so much as a GPS or a smartphone. And remember, those horses, as resilient as they were, they needed food and water. Supply lines stretched thinner than a monk's patience in a tavern, creating vulnerabilities that could be, and sometimes were, exploited by savvy opponents. Yet, the Mongol Empire didn't just thrive on conquest alone. They built an empire that was as much about connections as it was about cavalry charges. By controlling the Silk Road, they weren't just moving goods, they were the ultimate networkers of their time. This meant they could support their military campaigns with resources from the far corners of the known world. Silk, spices, and silver flowed through their lands, funding not only warfare, but also the splendor of cities like Karakoram, the empire's heart and soul. Picture it as the medieval world's answer to Silicon Valley, only with fewer tech startups and more yurts. So as you practice your archery and hone your skills, keep in mind that you're part of a military machine that revolutionized the art of war. But it's not just about the battle, it's about the bigger picture. The Mongols didn't just conquer territories, they reshaped the geopolitical landscape, creating new trade routes and cultural exchanges that reverberate through history. As you look around at your fellow warriors, each as committed to the cause as you are, it's clear that you're not just part of a horde. You're part of a legacy that's not about bloodshed alone, but but about forging connections that transcend mere conquest. And with that thought, you ride into the afternoon sun, ready for whatever challenges the day might throw your way. Whether it's perfecting the art of the feigned retreat or mastering the intricacies of steppe diplomacy, you're not just living history, you're making it. And while the legends might paint you as an unstoppable force, you know the truth. It's not invincibility that makes the Mongols legendary. It's the relentless drive to adapt, evolve, and, above all, survive. As the afternoon sun blazes down on the steppe, you find yourself gathered with your fellow warriors for a well-deserved break. It's time for lunch, but we're not talking about a cozy picnic with checkerboard blankets and wicker baskets. This is the Mongol Empire, after all, where even a meal comes with a side of intrigue and strategy. You're seated in a circle, sharing dried meat and fermented mare's milk. Yes, that's erag, the Mongol equivalent of a midday espresso shot. You might not be sipping lattes, but this concoction packs enough punch to fuel an empire. Now, while you're chewing on that savory meat, let's chew over the social and political structures that hold this behemoth of an empire together. Enter the Kurultai, the Mongol version of a high-stakes board meeting, but with less PowerPoint and more power plays. A Kurultai is a grand assembly where decisions are made, leadership is contested, and policies are shaped. Imagine a medieval TED Talk where the fate of nations hangs in the balance. The Kurultai exemplifies the Mongols' unique blend of democracy and despotism. Sure, Genghis Khan might have been the ultimate authority, but even he had to listen to the voices of the aristocracy and military leaders. It was here that the Mongol elite gathered to elect new Khans, plan military campaigns, and settle disputes. Think of it as their version of a parliamentary session, but with a bit more emphasis on archery skills than oratory. But don't be fooled into thinking the Mongols were a chaotic horde with no sense of governance. Their political system was finely tuned and sophisticated. It was all about meritocracy, baby. The Mongols didn't care if your great-great-grandfather sat on a throne. They cared if you could lead troops to victory and manage resources efficiently. This wasn't a family dynasty club. This was about getting the job done. Speaking of resources, let's talk economics. The Mongol Empire wasn't just about galloping hordes and fiery arrows. It was a well-oiled economic machine. They didn't just conquer for the glory, they conquered for the goods. By controlling the Silk Road, they essentially held the keys to the world's most lucrative trade network. We're talking about a commercial highway that stretched from China to the Mediterranean, facilitating the exchange of silk, spices, and cultural knowledge. If there was a medieval version of Amazon Prime, the Mongols were the ones delivering it with express shipping. And let's not forget the postal system. Yes, you heard that right. The Mongols had their own version of FedEx, known as the Yam system. This network of relay stations spanned thousands of miles, allowing messengers to traverse the empire with remarkable speed. It wasn't just about delivering messages, it was about maintaining control and communicating across vast distances. Consider it the ancient precursor to email, only with a few more horses and a lot less spam. Now, let's bust a myth while we're at it. The Mongols are often portrayed as ruthless conquerors, marauding across continents with little regard for the lands they occupied. But that's only half the story. They were also masterful administrators who understood the importance of stability for economic prosperity. Once a region was conquered, they were more interested in collecting taxes than skulls. They appointed local officials, respected local customs, and even adopted aspects of the cultures they ruled. You could say they were the original proponents of globalization. But let's not romanticize it too much. The Mongol Empire was built on the backs of its warriors, and life on the steppe was anything but easy. The same trade routes that brought wealth also brought challenges. Maintaining control over such a vast territory required constant vigilance and an ever-ready military. And while the Kurultai might have been a democratic platform, the reality was that power often rested with those who had the loyalty of the most skilled archers and the fastest horses. As you finish your meal and rise to prepare for the afternoon's activities, remember that the Mongol Empire was as complex as it was formidable. It was a world where a simple meal could be a prelude to political maneuverings and economic strategies that would shape history. So, as you mount your horse once more, ready to face whatever the rest of the day has in store, you're not just a warrior in an endless steppe. You're a vital part of an intricate tapestry of governance, trade, and power that stretched across continents and centuries. And so, with the sun dipping lower in the sky, you ride back into the fray, a living testament to the Empire's blend of might and management. Whether it's the thundering hooves of a cavalry charge or the quiet diplomacy of a Kuriltai, you embody the spirit of the Mongol Empire, a force of nature that reshaped the medieval world. Keep your bow at the ready and your mind sharp, because in this world, the only constant is change. And who knows, the next Kuriltai might just redefine the course of history once more. As the dust from your lunch break settles, the afternoon sun casts a golden hue across the steppe, setting the stage for the main event, the mock battle. This isn't just some medieval cosplay, my friend. It's a critical training exercise designed to fine-tune your skills and keep you battle-ready. Think of it as a full-dress rehearsal for Mongol warriors, where the stakes are as high as your horse's gallop. But don't be fooled, this is as much about brains as it is about brawn. The Mongol military machine wasn't just a force of nature, it was a psychological juggernaut. Their tactics were as much about mind games as they were about military might. Picture this. Your commanders have mastered the art of psychological warfare, a concept that would make even Sun Tzu nod in approval. It's not just about beating the enemy, it's about breaking their spirit before the battle even begins. Let's break down some of these legendary tactics. First up, the infamous feigned retreat. This isn't a simple game of tag, it's a calculated move, drawing the enemy in like a moth to a flame. You retreat, they follow, and then, just as they think they've got you, you spring the trap. Bam! You turn around and unleash chaos. This maneuver isn't just about skill, it's about reading your opponent like a book and knowing exactly when to flip the page. But it's not all smoke and mirrors. The Mongols were also masters of intelligence gathering and espionage, long before James Bond was a twinkle in Ian Fleming's eye. They used spies to infiltrate enemy ranks, gather vital information, and feed false intelligence. These spies weren't just shadowy figures. They were often merchants, travelers, or even defectors, anyone who could blend in and report back. Now, let's talk about the nitty-gritty reality of this warfare. While the legends paint a picture of invincible warriors, the truth is a bit more, shall we say, gritty. Battlefields were chaotic, brutal, and as unpredictable as today's stock market. Your training in these mock battles is crucial because it prepares you for the harsh realities of combat. You're not just learning to shoot an arrow, you're learning to anticipate, adapt, and survive. And then there's the innovation. The Mongols revolutionized warfare with strategies that would influence military tactics for centuries to come. They were the first to use a decentralized command structure, allowing for flexibility and rapid response. Each unit knew its role, but could adapt to the changing dynamics of the battlefield in real time. Imagine the chaos of war turned into a perfectly executed symphony. Each section playing its part, yet ready to improvise if the conductor nods. Sure, the romanticized image of the Mongol warrior charging across the plains is thrilling, but let's not forget the logistics. Moving an army across the vast steppe required meticulous planning. Supplies had to be managed, routes plotted, and contingencies prepared for everything from weather to unexpected resistance. The reality wasn't glamorous, it was a grind. The Mongols were as much about spreadsheets as they were about swordplay, though theirs were probably written on parchment, not Excel. And here's a little nugget of wisdom. While the legends focus on the battlefield, the real power came from off it. The Mongols' ability to gather and act on intelligence was a game changer. They didn't just react to the enemy, they anticipated them. This was a world where knowledge was as valuable as gold, and information flowed as freely as the steppe winds. As you run through the motions of the mock battle, it becomes clear that you're part of a military tradition that prized adaptability and intelligence as much as strength. The Mongol legacy wasn't built on brute force alone, it was forged through innovation and insight. You're not just riding a horse and shooting arrows, you're partaking in a legacy of strategic brilliance that reshaped the medieval world. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The day's not over, and the world of the Mongol warrior is one of constant evolution. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the steppe, you can be sure there's more to come. The legends of Mongol invincibility are enticing, but the reality is far more complex and intriguing. It's not just about the battles won, it's about the stories that endure, the tactics that transformed warfare, and the relentless drive to adapt and survive. So tighten your saddle and keep your wits sharp, because, in this world, the only certainty is that nothing stands still for long. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky with hues that would make even the most jaded Instagram influencer pause, the steppe begins to cool. You and your fellow warriors gather around the communal fire, ready to unwind after a day of relentless training and tactical maneuvers. It's story time. And here on the steppe, storytelling isn't just entertainment, it's a cultural cornerstone woven as tightly into the fabric of Mongol life as the sinew in your trusty bow. Let's delve into the heart of Mongol cultural life, where shamanism and oral tradition reign supreme. Shamanism, the spiritual backbone of the Mongol world, is not just a grab bag of mystical mumbo-jumbo. It's a complex belief system that bridges the tangible and intangible, connecting the physical world with the spirits of ancestors and nature. Shamans, those enigmatic figures draped in furs and beads, are more than just spiritual guides. They're the original life coaches, mediating between the earthly and the ethereal, performing rituals to ensure everything from good health to military success. And then there's the art of storytelling, an ancient Mongol Netflix binge, if you will. These tales are not just yarns spun for amusement. They're the threads that weave history, morality, and identity into the tapestry of life. Around the fire, you're not just passing the time, you're preserving the past. Stories of legendary figures like Genghis Khan aren't just recitations of deeds, they're lessons in leadership, strategy, and the harsh realities of life on the steppe. It's history with a healthy dose of drama and existential reflection. The Mongol Empire's influence wasn't limited to the battlefield or the trade routes. It stretched into the realms of culture and spirituality, reshaping societies far beyond its borders. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, might sound like an oxymoron given their warrior reputation, but it was a real thing. Between the 13th and 14th centuries, the empire provided a rare period of stability, allowing trade, technology, and ideas to flow more freely than ever before. Think of it as the medieval version of a global ceasefire, minus the peace treaties and Nobel Prizes. Now, let's talk about legacy, that tricky beast that refuses to stay in its historical lane. The Mongol Empire's legacy is a mixed bag, often romanticized as a golden age of cultural exchange or vilified as an era of brutal conquest. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the messy middle. Yes, they were conquerors, but they were also cultural conduits, bringing together East and West in ways that laid foundations for the modern world. It's like they were the original influences, only with more horses and less hashtagging. But let's not sugarcoat it. Life under Mongol rule wasn't all trade and tranquility. The empire's expansion was marked by fierce battles and the occasional scorched earth policy. Yet, it's crucial to understand that the Mongols didn't just steamroll over cultures, they often absorbed and adapted to them. This ability to integrate and innovate was key to their enduring impact. They weren't just interested in conquest, they were invested in the long game of cultural and economic exchange. In reflecting on how this day fits into the broader historical tapestry, it's clear that your role as a Mongol horse archer is more than just a soldier's tale. You're part of a world-shaping narrative that challenges the simplistic view of the Mongols as mere marauders. The empire's vast network of trade routes, its influence on warfare tactics, and its role in cultural diffusion are all part of a legacy that continues to ripple through history. So, as you sit by the fire, listening to tales of old, it's worth pondering the myths and realities of your existence. The stories might paint you as heroes or villains, but the truth is more nuanced. You're a living testament to the complexities of human ambition, survival, and adaptation. The Mongol Empire wasn't just about the clash of swords, it was about the merging of worlds. As the embers glow and the night deepens, you're reminded that history is never a straight line. It's a winding path of triumphs and trials, of empires rising and falling, each leaving its mark on the world. The Mongol legacy is a testament to the power of adaptability and resilience, qualities that resonate even today. So, as you lay back under the vast steppe sky, remember that you're not just part of history. You're a vital thread in the grand tapestry of human experience, a story still unfolding, with lessons and legacies that continue to shape our world. Copper and tin, are like the Batman and Robin of the Bronze Age. One's got the brawn, the other's got the brains, and together they saved the ancient world from the Stone Age doldrums. You see, copper was already a big deal by itself, strutting around the ancient world with its malleable charm and shiny finish. But the problem was, it wasn't exactly the toughest kid on the block. Enter tin, the unassuming sidekick that turned copper into the superhero we know as bronze. This dynamic duo was rocking the prehistoric scene as early as 3300 BCE, giving birth to what we, in our modern penchant for catchy names, call the Bronze Age. Now, in our high-tech era, where we can order gadgets from halfway around the world with a click, it's easy to overlook the sheer grit it took to get your hands on metals back in the day. The early metallurgists, those ancient tech geeks, weren't just fiddling around in their backyard sheds. They were embarking on epic quests, traversing vast distances that would make today's long-haul truckers nod in respect. We're talking journeys stretching over 2,000 kilometers, and all for the love of tin. Yep, that modest little metal that doesn't even get a periodic table entry of its own until way down the line was the secret sauce that transformed copper into something truly extraordinary. But let's pause here for a moment. There's a persistent myth that needs busting. The whole noble savage narrative that paints early metallurgists as mystical artisans gently coaxing nature's gifts into beautiful forms. The reality is a lot less poetic and far more industrious. These folks were the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs of their time, hustling and innovating to stay ahead. The tools and techniques they crafted were as much about efficiency and function as they were about form. Sure, they made some gorgeous stuff, but let's be honest, they were in it to win it with weapons and tools that worked. When you delve into the logistics of Bronze Age trade, it reads more like a Game of Thrones subplot than a simple exchange of goods. You had ports bustling with activity, caravans snaking across deserts, and ships braving treacherous seas. Tin was sourced from far-flung places like Cornwall in Britain and the Erzgebirge Mountains on the Czech-German border, while copper came from the likes of Cyprus and Anatolia. These weren't just leisurely jaunts. They were fraught with danger, with traders risking life and limb to secure their precious cargoes. Economically, bronze was a game-changer. It wasn't just about making shiny trinkets for the elite to flaunt. Bronze tools and weapons were stronger and more durable than their stone counterparts, revolutionizing agriculture, warfare, and craftsmanship. This ramped up productivity and changed the social dynamics of the time. Suddenly, you had more powerful states, better equipped armies, and artisans who could craft more intricate designs. It was like the Industrial Revolution of the ancient world, only with a lot more sweat and a lot less steam. Politically, the emergence of bronze as a dominant material played a role in the rise and fall of empires. Those who controlled the sources of tin and copper, or the trade routes to them, wielded a considerable amount of power. It was the ancient equivalent of having a monopoly on today's rare earth elements. This wasn't just about economics, it was a matter of survival and dominance. The Mycenaean Greeks, the Egyptians, the Hittites, and many others all jockeyed for position in this high-stakes game of resource control. Through all of this, we see a picture of early metallurgists as far more than romanticized craftsmen. They were savvy operators, navigating complex trade networks, experimenting with metallurgy techniques, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible with the materials at hand. They were the original alchemists, transforming simple elements into something greater, something that would lay the foundation for the empires and cultures that followed. In this light, the dawn of metallurgy isn't just a tale of technological triumph, it's a story of human ingenuity and the relentless drive to shape the world. So here we are, staring down the barrel of the Bronze Age boom, an era where metal was king and kingdoms were forged not just in the fires of battle, but in the fires of the smelter. If you think Bitcoin mining is a hustle, try keeping up with the Bronze Age metal rush. Back then, the copper-tin combo was the ultimate currency, the ancient world's crypto, trading hands in a complex web of economics and politics that would make even the shrewdest Wall Street broker break a sweat. Let's dive into the cost of this metallic marvel. Producing bronze wasn't just about melting some rocks together and calling it a day. No. The production of bronze was an expensive endeavor, a literal arms race with a hefty price tag. Consider this. To make a single bronze weapon, you needed about 9 parts copper to 1 part tin. That might sound simple, But here's the catch: tin was rarer than a unicorn at a horse show. Copper was relatively more abundant, but still required mining operations that were the ancient equivalent of a multi-million-dollar investment. We're talking about operations that needed manpower, logistics, and yes, a fair bit of luck. The costs didn't stop there. Once you had your raw materials, the smelting process demanded fuel, lots of it. Wood was the fuel of choice, turning entire forests into smelter fodder. In an age before deforestation was a buzzword, entire landscapes were transformed to keep the fires burning. The environmental impact was significant, but back then sustainability wasn't exactly on the agenda. It was all about who could outproduce and outarm their neighbours. But why go through all this trouble? Simple: power and prestige. Bronze was the status symbol of its day, a must-have for any self-respecting ruler looking to flex on their neighbours. If you had bronze, you had an edge in warfare, agriculture, and influence. City-states like Mycenae, and Thebes became powerhouses, their wealth and influence built on the back of bronze. These city-states weren't just political entities. They were economic machines, hubs of trade and industry that drew people from all corners of the ancient world. As with any boom, there were winners and losers. The elites who controlled the metal supply chains amassed fortunes, while the workers, the ancient 99%, toiled away in mines and smelters for meagre rewards. This wasn't a society of equals, folks. The idea that ancient communities were all about communal living and mutual support? Pure myth. The reality was a rigid social hierarchy, where the haves lorded it over the have-nots. The gap between the elite and the common folk was as wide as the Mediterranean. However, this wasn't just about economics and social class. The political landscape was equally shaped by bronze. Control the copper and tin routes, and you controlled the balance of power. Alliances were forged, wars were fought, and empires rose and fell based on access to these precious resources. The Hittites, for example, mastered the art of diplomacy and warfare, using their position in Anatolia to control key trade routes and assert dominance over their rivals. But don't get too swept up in the grandeur. Behind the epic tales of battle and glory lay a gritty reality of political intrigue and cutthroat competition. The Bronze Age wasn't just a time of noble warriors and wise kings. It was a period rife with espionage, betrayal, and power plays that would make a soap opera look like a children's story. This era of metal and might offered both romance and reality. The allure of bronze reshaped societies, but it also exposed the harsh truths of human nature. The relentless pursuit of power, the exploitation of resources, and the inequalities that arose as a result. In the balance of these forces, the city-states and empires of the Bronze Age built their legacies, laying the groundwork for the civilizations that would follow. And as we delve deeper into this world, remember, the story of the Bronze Age is far from over. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the fascinating tapestry of this pivotal era, where the stakes were high and the players were willing to gamble everything for a piece of the metal pie. As we journey deeper into the Bronze Age, let's peel back the layers of technological wizardry that made this era anything but primitive. If you're picturing a sweaty blacksmith pounding away at a lump of metal like some prehistoric DIY project, think again. These ancient metallurgists were more akin to Silicon Valley engineers than you might suspect, and their innovations could give our modern tech a run for its money. First up, let's talk casting techniques. Forget the image of a caveman accidentally discovering fire. Bronze Age foundries were the high-tech labs of their day. Picture this: a carefully constructed furnace reaching temperatures of around 905 degrees C, that's 1074 degrees C for those keeping score at home, hot enough to melt copper and tin into a molten concoction. The artisans then poured this glowing liquid into pre-made molds, often crafted from clay or stone. It's like the original 3D printing, just with a lot more heat. These molds weren't just haphazardly thrown together either. They were meticulously designed to create everything from weapons to intricate jewelry. Consider the double-headed axes of Minoan Crete or the stunning swords of the Mycenaeans, each a testament to the precision and skill these early metallurgists possessed. The results were not only functional, but aesthetically pleasing, embodying a blend of art and utility that's the hallmark of great design, ancient or modern. And speaking of design, Let's dive into the mystery of the lost wax technique, a method so ingenious it's still used by modern jewelers and sculptors today. Here's how it worked. An artisan would sculpt a detailed model of their desired object in wax. This wax model was then encased in clay or plaster. Once the mold hardened, it was fired, causing the wax to melt and drain away, leaving a perfect cavity. Molten bronze was then poured into this cavity, capturing every detail of the original wax model. Talk about a masterclass in precision engineering. But don't take this to mean that every piece turned out perfect on the first try. Trial and error were the names of the game, and these ancient inventors weren't afraid to experiment. They pushed the boundaries of what was possible with their materials, and in doing so, they laid the groundwork for everything from modern engineering to artistic expression. The lost wax method alone is a testament to their creative problem-solving skills, showing that these folks were no strangers to thinking outside the box, or mold in this case. Now, while it's tempting to romanticize these technological marvels as the product of some ancient golden age, let's keep our feet firmly on the ground. This wasn't a world where everyone sat around in togas philosophizing about the beauty of a well-crafted sword. These tools and weapons were made for a reason: survival and dominance. The sophistication of a bronze sword wasn't just about craftsmanship, it was about ensuring you came out on top in a scrap with the neighbors. The stakes were high and the competition was fierce. The Hittites, for instance, were not just sitting idly by. By around 1600 BCE, they had refined their metalworking to create stronger, more reliable weapons, giving them an edge over rivals. Their secret? Adding a bit more tin to their bronze, which made it harder and less likely to snap in the heat of battle. It's a bit like upgrading your operating system. Sure, the old version worked, but the new one just runs smoother. And in this game of technological one-upmanship, the Mycenaeans and Egyptians weren't about to be left behind. They adopted these innovations with gusto, ensuring their armies were equipped to the teeth with the latest in bronze weaponry. This wasn't just about fighting, it was about projecting power. A well-armed soldier was a walking advertisement for the might of his city-state, a symbol of technological prowess that could intimidate foes without a single blow being struck. Of course, with all this talk of warfare and weapons, it's easy to forget the everyday applications of Bronze Age tech. Agriculture, for instance, saw a revolution thanks to bronze. Plows and sickles crafted from this sturdy material boosted efficiency, allowing farmers to cultivate more land and yield greater harvests. This wasn't just good news for the farmers, it fueled population growth, urbanization and, you guessed it, more complex societies. And let's not overlook the role of bronze in trade and economy. These tools and weapons weren't just for local consumption. They were commodities, traded across the ancient world in a network of commerce that would make today's supply chains look like a game of hopscotch. Bronze was the Bitcoin of its day, a currency of prestige and power that crossed borders and connected cultures. So, the next time you hear someone dismiss ancient technology as primitive, remind them of the Bronze Age innovators who were casting, molding, and engineering their way into history. These pioneers laid the foundations for the complex societies that followed, proving that human ingenuity knows no bounds, whether it's turning molten metal into a masterpiece or transforming an idea into reality. And as we inch closer to the end of our Bronze Age journey, remember, the story is only just beginning. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of this pivotal era, where the stakes were high and the players were willing to gamble everything for a piece of the metal pie. As we continue our journey through the Bronze Age, it's time to dig into the cultural ripples that metallurgy sent across the ancient world. Picture this era as a grand stage where bronze wasn't just a prop, but the star of the show, influencing everything from art to warfare and everyday living. We're not just talking about a tech upgrade here, we're exploring a full-on societal transformation. First up, let's talk art. The beauty of bronze sculptures is their ability to seem both timeless and cutting-edge, even thousands of years later. The ancient Greeks, for instance, weren't content with just chiseling away at marble blocks. They were busy experimenting with bronze to create sculptures that captured the human form in ways that were as lifelike as they were innovative. The famed charioteer of Delphi, dating back to around 470 BCE, stands as a testament to these artistic leaps. This statue wasn't just a decorative piece, it was a symbol of technological mastery. With bronze, Artists could capture the dynamism of movement, the tension of a poised athlete, and even the intricate folds of a tunic, elevating their work to a whole new level of realism. But hold on, before we get too lost in the romance of ancient artistry, let's not forget the brutal reality that bronze was also a medium for manufacturing instruments of war. The Egyptians, for example, were cranking out bronze weapons that would make any ancient warrior drool. The khopesh, a sickle-shaped sword, became the go-to weapon for Egyptian soldiers around 2500 BCE. This wasn't just about having a shiny new toy, it was about having the upper hand on the battlefield. The curved design allowed for both slashing and chopping, making it versatile and deadly. And you better believe that gave them a strategic edge. Speaking of strategy, let's bust the myth of the lone warrior hero while we're here. Sure, Achilles and his ilk make for great stories, but the truth is that many battles in the Bronze Age were won not by individual feats of strength, but by the meticulous orchestration of logistics and tactics. The Hittites, for instance, were masters of this game. Around 1274 BCE, at the Battle of Kadesh, they didn't just storm in with brute force. Instead, they used a clever mix of chariotry and infantry, coordinated with a precision that would give modern military strategists something to chew on. This wasn't about one hero with a shiny sword. It was about outsmarting the opponent with well-planned maneuvers and a bit of old-fashioned cunning. Now, let's zoom out from the battlefield and see how bronze shaped everyday life. The introduction of bronze tools revolutionized agriculture. Suddenly, farmers could trade in their stone axes and wooden plows for more efficient bronze versions. Think about the plowshare, a simple yet transformative tool that made tilling the land faster and more effective. This wasn't just about farming, it was about laying the groundwork for urbanization. More food meant more people, and more people meant the growth of cities. It's like bronze was the silent partner in the urban development firm of the ancient world. But there's a cost to every advantage, and metallurgy was no exception. The environmental impact of bronze production was significant. Entire forests were sacrificed on the altar of progress, fueling the furnaces that birthed this wonder metal. Back then, if you wanted a new sword or plow, you paid in trees. And while the word sustainability wasn't exactly on the tip of anyone's tongue in 2000 BCE, the consequences of deforestation were felt. Landscapes were altered, and the resources needed to sustain societies became a constant concern. Of course, the societal impact of bronze wasn't just about tools and trees, it was about power dynamics. Those who controlled the metal controlled the narrative. The city of Ugarit, for instance, became a hub of trade and culture thanks to its prime location near copper and tin sources. As a result, it played a critical role in the exchange of goods and ideas. This wasn't just about economics, it was about influence. Ugarit was the Silicon Valley of its time, a place where innovation and commerce collided in a spectacular display of human ingenuity. And let's not overlook the role of bronze in shaping social hierarchies. Owning bronze items was a status symbol, a way to flaunt wealth and power. The elites adorned themselves with bronze jewelry and showcased their status with bronze artifacts. Meanwhile, the common folk, the ancient equivalent of today's middle class, could only aspire to such luxury. This wasn't just about having more stuff. It was about drawing lines between the haves and have-nots, a reminder that some things never change. Ultimately, the allure of the Bronze Age wasn't just in its technology or artistry, but in its complexity. It was an era where art and war, progress and exploitation, beauty and brutality existed side by side. The story of bronze isn't just about metal, it's about the human condition. It's about our relentless pursuit of advancement, our capacity for creativity, and our tendency to repeat the same patterns, for better or worse. As we continue to unravel the tapestry of the Bronze Age, keep in mind that the story is far from over. There are still layers to peel back, intricacies to explore, and truth to uncover. So stay tuned as we delve further into this fascinating era, where every twist and turn reveals more about the world then, and perhaps a little about ourselves now. As we peel back the layers of history, we find ourselves on the cusp of a monumental shift, the decline of the Bronze Age and the dawn of the Iron Age. Our journey thus far has been a whirlwind of molten metal and societal transformation. But now it's time to address the elephant in the room. Why did the Bronze Age, with all its glimmering glory, eventually fall from grace? First, let's talk about the environmental factor. Mother Nature's not-so-subtle reminder that she always gets the final say. As the demand for bronze skyrocketed, so did the consumption of wood for smelting, leading to deforestation on a massive scale. Entire forests were chewed up by the relentless appetite of the Bronze Age furnaces. By around 1200 BCE, the landscape in parts of the Near East and the Mediterranean was starting to look more like a barren wasteland than a thriving ecosystem. And when you mess with the environment, you inevitably mess with your own survival. Soil erosion, changes in climate, and resource depletion began to take their toll, leaving societies scrambling to adapt. Economically, the Bronze Age was a house of cards that leaned heavily on its intricate trade networks. It wasn't just about hoarding copper and tin like they were going out of style. It was about moving these metals across vast distances in a delicate dance of diplomacy and commerce. But around the same time the forests were dwindling, those very trade routes were being disrupted. Sea peoples, an enigmatic confederation of marauding raiders, swept through the Mediterranean, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. These guys were the original pirates, and they didn't just plunder ships. They dismantled the entire trade system that the Bronze Age civilizations depended on. Now, let's not glamorize these raiders with the romantic notion of adventurous buccaneers. In reality, their incursions were a catastrophe for the established powers. As city after city fell, the supply chains for tin and copper were severed like a clean slice from a well-sharpened sword. Imagine running a high-tech company today and suddenly losing access to silicon chips. Total chaos, right? That's what happened to the Bronze Age societies. They had the know-how but lost the means to produce their signature metal. Socially, the fallout was intense. The upheaval led to the collapse of some of the era's most prominent civilizations, including the Hittites and Mycenaeans. It was like watching the fall of the Roman Empire, but with more molten metal and less toga action. Cities that were once bustling trade hubs became ghost towns almost overnight. The power vacuum left in the wake of these collapses prompted migrations and societal restructuring. People moved, cultures blended, and new communities formed, each trying to make sense of the shifting landscape. But why, you ask, did iron rise to prominence in the midst of all this chaos? Well, necessity is the mother of invention, and with resources dwindling and trade routes crumbling, societies had to adapt or die. Enter iron, the plucky underdog of the metal world. Unlike tin, iron was more abundant and could be sourced locally, eliminating the need for perilous trade expeditions. By around 1200 BCE, people began to figure out how to smelt and work with iron, a process that required hotter furnaces and more skill, but offered a payoff in strength and durability. At first, iron didn't quite match bronze in terms of quality. Early iron artifacts were often brittle, prone to breakage, and generally unimpressive. But incremental improvements over the centuries led to the development of steel, a stronger and more reliable material than bronze could ever dream of being. By the time King David was composing psalms and the Zhou dynasty was taking root in China, iron was well on its way to becoming the new standard. This transition from bronze to iron wasn't just a technological shift, it was a paradigm change. It marked the beginning of the Iron Age and a new chapter in human history. The tools and weapons forged from iron were harder and more resilient, allowing civilizations to expand their influence and fortify their defenses. And while the romantic allure of bronze still captured the imagination, after all, who doesn't love a good underdog story? Iron was the future. It was the Tesla to bronze's Model T, the smartphone to its rotary dial. In the grand tapestry of history, the decline of the Bronze Age and the rise of the Iron Age serve as a reminder of the cyclical nature of technological advancement. Just as bronze once revolutionized the ancient world, iron would pave the way for empires like Rome to flourish. It's a testament to human resilience and adaptability, a theme that echoes across centuries. So, as we marvel at our own technological obsessions, from AI to quantum computing, it's worth pondering how future generations might view our era. Will they see us as pioneers of a digital revolution, or perhaps as builders of an unsustainable house of cards? In wrapping up our Bronze Age saga, let's remember that history is rarely black and white. It's a kaleidoscope of innovation and decline, triumph and tragedy. The allure of the Bronze Age lies not just in its shiny artifacts, but in the stories they tell of human ambition and the relentless pursuit of progress. So, as we close this chapter, let's carry forward the lessons of the past. That ingenuity can spark transformation, that no empire is eternal, and that perhaps, just perhaps, the real treasure is the knowledge we gain along the way. Strolling through the clamour of ancient Babylon, you're enveloped in a city that's the loved child of a bustling metropolis and a grand bazaar. It's 600 BCE, and this place is less of a sleepy, ancient town and more of a Vegas Strip meets Wall Street kind of vibe. As an aspiring astronomer, you're not just dodging merchants peddling everything from dates to dubious-looking ointments. You're also navigating a world obsessed with the stars, but hilariously clueless about what they actually mean. In Babylon, agriculture isn't just an economic driver. It's the engine that keeps this massive machine humming. Picture this: fields of barley stretching as far as the eye can see, with the Euphrates River playing the role of generous uncle, bestowing water and life. You're part of a society that knows the rhythm of harvests like the back of its hand. Grain is your bread and butter, literally and figuratively. And while you might dream of the cosmos, today you're more likely to be calculating the stars' influence on next month's crop yields than discovering a new constellation. Trade here is a spectacle all its own. Babylon is the beating heart of ancient commerce, a place where traders from across Mesopotamia and beyond gather like moths to a flame. The city's reputation as a hub of luxury goods, think textiles, spices, metals, makes it a magnet for every merchant with a camel and a dream. And let's not forget the cost of living. A goat, the measure of wealth in this neck of the woods, sets you back about 1 shekel. Now, that might not sound like much, but when you're juggling the expenses of scrolls, star charts, and the occasional indulgence in palm wine, every shekel counts. Politically, Babylon is a bit like a game of chess, where you're just a pawn and the ruling class are the grandmasters. The king, perched atop the social pyramid, wields influence like a scribe wields a stylus. His decrees shape your life, from what you eat to what you wear. But you, dear astronomer, have a special place in this society. Stargazers like you are the ancient world's version of weather forecasters, predicting cosmic events that might just sway the king's next campaign. Your calculations could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and a famine, making you both revered and, let's face it, slightly feared. And then there's the stargazing itself, a curious mix of science and spectacle. Babylonians have a thing for the heavens, and who can blame them? The skies above are a vast, glittering tapestry that's both mesmerizing and mystifying. But here's the kicker. For all their celestial calculations, they couldn't tell you a planet from a particularly bright star. Venus, that lovely evening star, just another shiny dot in the mosaic. The romantic notion of stargazing is all well and good, but the reality is a little less glamorous and a bit more like fumbling around in the dark. Quite literally. The irony is rich. A society so invested in celestial navigation, yet blissfully unaware that those wandering stars are the planets we know today. You're part of a tradition that meticulously tracks the movements of Jupiter and Saturn, predicting eclipses with uncanny accuracy, yet misses the mark on identifying them as separate worlds. It's like being a master chef who can craft a perfect souffle but doesn't know what an egg is. So here you are, in the thick of it all, a budding astronomer in a city that's both a marvel and a mystery. Your days are a blur of calculations, observations, and the occasional existential crisis about the nature of the universe. But hey, if nothing else, at least you know the price of a goat. And in Babylon, that's a start. And so, armed with a head full of star charts and a belly full of palm wine because, let's face it, inspiration sometimes needs a little nudge, you make your way to the great ziggurat of Babylon. These towering structures are the skyscrapers of their day, minus the elevators and with a lot more stairs. Built to reach the heavens, they serve a dual purpose. They're both the ancient world's observatories and a testament to human ambition, with a healthy dash of ego thrown in for good measure. The ziggurat is where the magic happens, or at least where you like to pretend it does. By day, it might just look like a fancy stack of mud bricks, but by night, it transforms into your personal portal to the cosmos. Up here, you spend countless hours squinting at the sky, trying to discern patterns in what often feels like celestial chaos. If only you had a telescope. But alas, you're working with clay tablets and a lot of wishful thinking. Now, let's talk about these clay tablets. They're the ancient equivalent of a notepad, but with none of the convenience. Recording your observations requires a steady hand and a sharp stylus, and heaven forbid you make a mistake because there's no erasing cuneiform. Each night, you etch the positions of stars, the phases of the moon, and anything else that catches your eye. It's painstaking work, and not exactly glamorous, but it's necessary. After all, you're creating the earliest known star catalogues, a legacy that will outlast even the mightiest of Babylonian kings. Your mission? To track celestial events with the precision of a modern-day Swiss watchmaker, minus the tools and technology. Eclipses are particularly fascinating and terrifying. While today we might grab our eclipse glasses and head outside for a bit of cosmic wonder, back then these occurrences were a cause for alarm. Imagine trying to explain to the king why the sun decided to take an unscheduled coffee break. No pressure, right? The reality is, predicting these events involves a lot of trial and error. The Babylonians are credited with developing a lunisolar calendar and recording the Saros cycle of eclipses, a feat accomplished not by divine insight, but by good old-fashioned observation and a heap of educated guesses. You're essentially playing a celestial game of connect the dots, hoping you don't miss one. And when you get it right, you're hailed as a genius. When you don't, well, let's just say that palm wine starts to look more appealing. But don't let the myth of Babylonian wisdom fool you. The truth is, your observations are as much about luck as they are about skill. The tools of your trade are primitive at best. Without lenses or optics, you're left to rely on your own two eyes and a lot of squinting. And while it's easy to romanticize the image of a lone astronomer silhouetted against the night sky, the reality is a bit less poetic. You, my friend, are a glorified stargazer, doing your best to make sense of a universe that refuses to be easily categorized. So why do you do it? Because in a world where the gods are capricious and the king's favor is as fleeting as a shooting star, this work gives you a semblance of control. Each mark on your tablet is a small victory against the chaos of the universe. And maybe, just maybe, your work will help make sense of it all, or at least keep you in the king's good graces for another season. While the allure of Babylonian astronomy often lies in its perceived sophistication, let's not kid ourselves. It's a field built on a foundation of educated guesses and a lot of staring into the abyss. But that's the beauty of it. In a time when the world was thought to be a flat disk resting on cosmic waters, you dared to look up and question. And in doing so, you laid the groundwork for generations of stargazers to come. So here's to you, the ancient astronomer, with your clay tablets and indomitable curiosity. May the skies be ever in your favor, or at least not completely misleading. So, you've got clay tablets in one hand and the cosmos in the other, and you're standing on the shoulders of the mathematically inclined giants of Babylon. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of what makes you, the Babylonian astronomer, tick, or at least scribble furiously, on your mud bricks. It's time to marvel at the mathematical wizardry that enables you to chart the heavens with a base 60 number system. Why base 60, you ask? Because apparently, the Mesopotamians thought, why not make things as complicated as possible? Picture this, while most civilizations were content with counting on their fingers and maybe toes, the Babylonians went full overachiever and decided to use a system based on 60. That's right, 60. It's the mathematical equivalent of deciding to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops just because you can. But it wasn't all for show. Base 60, or sexagesimal, is actually quite handy for calculations involving fractions, and it's the reason we still use 60 to segment hours and minutes today. But let's not get too carried away with admiration. This system was also a bit of a headache. Imagine trying to do long division with no calculators and only clay tablets. It's the kind of thing that gives modern mathematicians nightmares. Speaking of nightmares, let's talk predictions. You see, in Babylon, every celestial event was a message from the gods, and they weren't exactly sending postcards with friendly greetings. When the moon eclipsed the sun, it wasn't just a neat trick of the cosmos, it was a divine memo. And like any memo from a higher up, it was open to interpretation. Enter the Enuma Anu in Lull, a compendium of celestial omens that was essentially the ancient world's version of your horoscope, but with higher stakes. Imagine trying to run an empire based on the interpretation of what Venus is doing in the sky. You've got to admire the courage or the audacity. But here's the kicker. For all its mystical mumbo-jumbo, the Enuma Anu Enlil wasn't just a collection of wild guesses. It was based on painstaking observations recorded over centuries. The Babylonians might have believed in the divine messages behind the stars, but they were also diligent in their data collection. Each entry in this tome of celestial cause and effect was the result of generations of astronomers like you staring at the sky and hoping for insight, or at least a bit of clarity. Now, let's have a chuckle at some of the predictions that these celestial events inspired. For instance, a lunar eclipse might foretell the downfall of the king, leading to some palace intrigue and possibly a few sleepless nights for the monarch. Or consider this gem: if Venus appears in the east in the morning, it could spell disaster for the barley crop. Because, nothing says agricultural crisis quite like a shiny dot in the sky. It's like the universe's way of saying, I'll see your logical cause in effect and raise you one utterly bizarre connection. And yet, despite the oddity of these predictions, they served a very real purpose. In a world where uncertainty was the norm, any semblance of understanding, or even the illusion of it, was valuable. The king might not be thrilled by the idea of Venus ruining his breakfast, but he would certainly pay attention. After all, these predictions could influence everything from military campaigns to agricultural planning. So, while you might chuckle at the absurdity, remember that this was serious business, and getting it wrong could have serious consequences. But let's not kid ourselves. Babylonian astronomy wasn't all doom and gloom. The Babylonians developed some truly impressive mathematical models to predict celestial movements. They didn't just track the stars. They mapped them with an accuracy that would make even modern astronomers nod in appreciation. They calculated the apparent motion of celestial bodies with stunning precision, considering they were working with negligible technology and a lot of ingenuity. So, how scientific were these observations? Well, that's a loaded question. On one hand, the Babylonians were pioneers in the field of astronomy. They developed the earliest known star catalogues and were able to predict eclipses with surprising accuracy. On the other hand, their interpretations were heavily coloured by superstition and religious belief. It's a bit like trying to draw a map of the world while insisting that dragons live at the edges. There's a kernel of truth wrapped in layers of myth. In the end, Babylonian astronomy is a testament to human curiosity and the desire to make sense of the world. It's a reminder that we've always looked to the stars for answers, even when those answers were more than a little questionable. So here's to you, the ancient astronomer, with your head in the clouds and your feet firmly planted on the ziggurat. Keep squinting at the sky, etching your observations, and maybe, just maybe, you'll unravel a bit more of the universe's mysteries. Just try not to let Venus ruin your day. And speaking of days that Venus might ruin, let's not forget the glorious mess that is the intersection of Babylonian astronomy and society. Picture this. You're standing on the ziggurat, clay tablet in hand, and you spot something peculiar in the sky. An eclipse is coming. An event that could either make or break your reputation faster than a chariot race in the city square. As you scribble furiously, you know that this isn't just an astronomical event, it's a societal earthquake wrapped in a celestial blanket. First off, let's talk agriculture, the lifeblood of Babylon. When you're predicting celestial events, you're not just stargazing for funsies. Your calculations determine when farmers plant and when they harvest. A mistimed sowing could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and a field of dead dreams. Think of it as ancient Babylon's version of insider trading, but instead of stocks, you're dealing in barley. And if your predictions help the kingdom avoid a famine, well, that's worth more than a few goats, maybe even a promotion to the king's inner circle. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. While the idea of an astronomer saving the day sounds like a scene from a historical blockbuster, the reality is a tad less glamorous. Your predictions, while well-intentioned, are often a roll of the dice. You're like a cosmic weatherman, and sometimes you get it wrong. But hey, if you're lucky, the farmers will just curse you under their breath and not send a shekel-wielding mob your way. Now, onto the high-stakes world of Babylonian politics. Predicting a solar eclipse wasn't just an academic exercise, it was a political maneuver. The king, ever wary of celestial omens, relied on you to provide the cosmic cliff notes. Imagine trying to explain why the sun's temporary vanishing act doesn't mean doom for his reign. It's the kind of pressure that could turn even the toughest scribes into nervous wrecks. But if you manage to correctly predict such an event, you might just earn a place in the royal court. A seat at the big kids' table, so to speak. The economic implications of your work are a whole different kettle of fish. In a society where the stars tell the future, people are willing to pay a pretty shekel to avoid bad omens. Predicting a solar eclipse accurately could prevent citywide panic, saving merchants from a plummet in sales and farmers from unnecessary sacrifices to appease the gods. Essentially, you're in the business of cosmic crisis management, and business is booming. Each correct prediction not only earns you respect, but also keeps the city's economy from spiraling into chaos. It's like being the ancient world's version of a stock market analyst, but with a lot more guesswork and fewer spreadsheets. Speaking of warfare, let's not underestimate the role of the stars in battle strategy. Babylonian kings often consulted astronomers before embarking on military campaigns. Your celestial insights could determine the timing of an invasion or a retreat. Miss an eclipse prediction, and you might just send your king marching into disaster. Get it right, and you're a hero. It's a high-stakes game where the line between sage and scapegoat is razor thin. But let's not sugarcoat it. The romanticized view of Babylonian astronomers as mystical sages is a tad exaggerated. Sure, you've got the ear of the king in a city hanging on your every word, but your predictions are as much about trial and error as they are about divine insight. It's a bit like reading the stars with one eye closed, hoping you don't trip over your own hubris. Your calculations are a mix of skill, luck, and a dash of desperation. Not exactly the stuff of legend. So, why does this romantic myth persist? Well, it's simple. People love a good story, and nothing beats the image of an ancient sage silhouetted against the night sky, uncovering the mysteries of the cosmos. It's a narrative that's as old as time, and as comforting as a warm blanket on a cold night. But beneath the veneer of wisdom lies the gritty reality of guesswork and the ever-present fear of failure. It's a tale of human endeavor, warts and all, and that's what makes it truly fascinating. In the grand tapestry of Babylonian society, you, the astronomer, are both a key player and a humble servant of the stars. Your work influences the very fabric of life, from fields of barley to the battlefield. Each prediction is a gamble with high stakes, where the odds are as unpredictable as the cosmos itself. Yet, despite the uncertainty, you continue to gaze upward, driven by curiosity and the hope that maybe, just maybe, the stars will align in your favor. As you stand there, squinting at the sky, remember that your legacy is woven into the very fabric of history. You're more than just a stargazer, you're a pioneer, charting the unknown with little more than clay tablets and determination. So keep scribbling, keep guessing, and above all, keep looking up. Because in a world where the stars hold sway over everything from crops to kings, your observations are a beacon of hope, and a reminder that, sometimes, the universe makes a little sense. With your eyes set on the night sky and feet firmly planted on the ziggurat, you're more than just an astronomer. You're an unwitting architect of future scientific thought. It's a heady mix of stardust and destiny, with a hint of divine comedy thrown in for good measure. The Babylonians, with their clay tablets and penchant for celestial guesswork, didn't just fumble around in the dark. They set the stage for the scientific method itself. Let's take this opportunity to unpack how their blend of brilliance and blunder echoes through the ages. First, let's get something straight. The Babylonians didn't just give us the tools to track stars, they handed us the very concept of systematic observation. You see, tracking Jupiter's meandering path across the sky wasn't just a party trick or a way to impress the king, it was the beginning of empirical science. When you sit down with your stylus and tablet, you're not just scribbling numbers, you're documenting data, analyzing patterns, and drawing conclusions. It's like the prehistoric version of Excel for dummies, minus the spreadsheets, but with all the nerdy satisfaction. This systematic approach to astronomy laid the groundwork for future civilizations to adopt and refine. The Greeks, particularly the likes of Ptolemy, took these Babylonian practices and ran with them, adding a splash of geometry and a dollop of philosophy. But let's not pretend everything was sunshine and celestial clarity. The Babylonians, bless their starry-eyed optimism, believed the heavens were sending them messages. It was a time when Venus appearing in the wrong place could make you rethink your life choices, or at least your breakfast plans. While the mystical mumbo-jumbo might make us chuckle today, it was serious business back then. Yet, These same beliefs paved the way for future inquiries. By trying to decode the whims of the gods, Babylonian astronomers inadvertently championed a spirit of questioning that would fuel scientific curiosity for centuries. Now, let's talk numbers. Specifically, the base 60 number system. It's the reason you can tell time, calculate angles, and split a pizza into perfectly even slices, all thanks to the Babylonians' obsession with 60. Why 60? Well, it's a wonderfully divisible number, playing nice with 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Basically, it's the social butterfly of integers. But this wasn't just about mathematics for the Babylonians. It was about harmony and order in a universe that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. The remnants of their numerical wizardry are still with us, hiding in plain sight every time you glance at the clock or navigate by GPS. It's a legacy that's as practical as it is profound. And speaking of legacy, let's not forget the Saros cycle, that nifty 18-year, 11-day period that predicts eclipses. While today we might take eclipse predictions for granted, back in Babylon, this was cutting-edge science. It was like having the cheat codes to the universe, allowing astronomers to anticipate these awe-inspiring events with a degree of accuracy that was nothing short of miraculous for the time. This knowledge wasn't just useful, it was empowering, offering a sense of control in a world where the gods seemed to hold all the cards. Yet, for all their achievements, the Babylonians were also masters of misunderstanding. They meticulously tracked celestial movements without realizing they were planets orbiting a sun. It's like being able to describe the intricate dance of a ballet without ever realizing it's taking place on a stage. But here's the thing, these misconceptions were stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. They forced future astronomers to ask deeper questions, to refine their observations, and ultimately to see the cosmos more clearly. So, what does all this mean for you, our intrepid Babylonian astronomer? Well, your nights spent squinting at the stars were more than just a quest for royal favor or a means to ensure a good barley harvest. They were part of a grand tradition of exploration and discovery, one that would inspire countless others to look up and wonder. You were the first chapter in a story that would unfold across millennia, a tale of human curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. And let's give a nod to the cultural myths that have inflated your reputation. Yes, the image of the wise Babylonian astronomer silhouetted against a sky full of stars is as romantic as it gets. But it's also a reminder of the power of storytelling. Myths are more than just fanciful tales. They're the way we connect with our past, making sense of the world and our place in it. While the reality may have involved more guesswork and less stardust, the myth endures because it captures the essence of human endeavor. In the end, the legacy of Babylonian astronomy is one of both brilliance and blunder, a testament to our capacity for both understanding and misunderstanding the universe. It's a reminder that progress is as much about the questions we ask as the answers we find. So, as you stand on the ziggurat with a clay tablet in one hand and a universe full of mysteries in the other, remember that you're more than just a footnote in history. You're a pioneer, a trailblazer, and a dreamer all rolled into one. And as you gaze up at the stars tonight, take pride in knowing that your observations have woven themselves into the very fabric of human knowledge. They've inspired generations of astronomers, mathematicians, and dreamers to follow in your footsteps, to look up and wonder, to question and explore. Your legacy is as vast as the cosmos itself, a blend of brilliance and blunder that continues to shine bright in the annals of history. So here's to you, the Babylonian astronomer, with your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. Keep looking up, and may the stars forever guide your way. In the bustling world of the Song dynasty, tea wasn't just a beverage, it was an obsession. If you think your local coffee shop has a devoted fan base, that's nothing compared to the tea fervor that gripped China from 960 to 179 AD. Tea was the Starbucks of its day, minus the frappuccinos and loyalty cards, of course. To understand the origins of this cultural phenomenon, we need to follow the aroma of dried leaves back to the roots of its commercial boom. Let's start with the big picture. The Song dynasty was a time of immense economic growth and innovation. We're talking about a pre-industrial China that was so ahead of its time, it could make the Renaissance look like amateur hour. It was here that tea transformed from a humble leaf to a national staple, much like how a grunge band suddenly hits mainstream success. But instead of selling out stadiums, tea was traded across the empire and beyond, becoming a linchpin of international commerce. The Song rulers weren't just sipping tea, they were sipping profit. Tea had become a major player in the economy, comparable to the way oil dictates geopolitics today. It was cultivated extensively in regions like Fujian and Sichuan, which were the equivalent of Napa Valley for tea aficionados. This wasn't just any plant. They cultivated varieties with names as poetic as their flavors: Dragonwell, Silver Needle, and the ever-popular Green Snail Spring. Each had its own unique twist, much like a craft beer lineup that keeps hipsters coming back for more. Now, about those trade routes, the Song dynasty was well connected, both internally and externally. Domestic trade routes crisscrossed the empire, ensuring that tea could flow from the remote terraced hillsides to the bustling urban centers where the elite demanded their daily fix. Internationally, the Silk Road was the highway of choice, though in this case, it was more a tea road. They didn't have Amazon Prime, but tea was still reaching markets as far away as the Middle East. The maritime routes along the South China Sea were also crucial, with junks, those iconic, wide-sailed ships carrying precious cargo to eager merchants. The Song government, in their infinite wisdom, saw an opportunity. If tea was gold, then taxes were the pickaxe. They levied taxes on tea that would make modern tax collectors blush. The Tea and Horse Bureau was established to manage the trade and ensure the government got its cut. Yes, you heard right. A whole bureau dedicated to tea and horses. It's like if the IRS and the Kentucky Derby decided to team up. The absurdity lay not just in the taxes themselves, but in their implementation. Imagine trying to tax every latte sold in your city. Sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare, right? But here's the kicker. While the government was busy counting its coins, the people were developing a caffeine addiction that would rival any modern-day coffee shop regular. Tea houses sprouted up everywhere, becoming the social hubs of the day. Picture a place where scholars debated philosophy, merchants brokered deals, and poets found inspiration, all fueled by endless cups of tea. This fervor wasn't without its consequences. As demand skyrocketed, so did prices. Tea became a luxury item, a status symbol. A pound of the finest tea could cost you as much as a skilled laborer's monthly wage. Imagine saving up just to get your hands on a few ounces of premium leaves. Yet, despite the cost, the thirst for tea only grew stronger. It was the social lubricant of the age, the medium through which all manner of interactions took place. The impact of this tea mania extended beyond the borders of the empire. Foreign merchants and traders were eager to get in on the action, bringing their own goods in exchange for the coveted leaves. Tea became a significant component of trade negotiations, influencing everything from diplomacy to economic alliances. So, there you have it. Tea in the Song dynasty was more than just a drink. It was a cultural juggernaut, an economic powerhouse, and a catalyst for social interaction. It shaped the world in ways that few commodities have, setting the stage for the global tea culture we know today. And all of this was happening under the watchful eye of a government that was trying, and often failing, to regulate the enthusiasm of a nation hopelessly in love with its tea. The story of Song dynasty tea culture is a testament to the power of simple pleasures and the surprising ways they can shape history. Whether you're sipping on a modern-day matcha latte or brewing a pot of oolong, remember that you're part of a tradition that spans centuries and continents. Just be glad you don't have to pay taxes to the Tea and Horse Bureau for your morning cup. Yet. And speaking of traditions that span centuries, let's dive into the social labyrinth of Song dynasty tea consumption, a scene that could make modern influencer gatherings look like a backyard barbecue. Elite tea parties were the place to be, where the who's who of the dynasty gathered in their finest silks, ready to outdo each other in the art of tea appreciation. Imagine a room full of socialites, each trying to one-up the other with their tea knowledge, in a setting where the stakes were higher than a reality show elimination round. First up, the elite tea parties. These were no casual get-togethers. They were meticulously orchestrated social events that would make a modern-day gala feel like a casual brunch. The host was akin to a maestro, conducting an evening of performances that included not just sipping tea, but also poetry recitals, philosophical debates, and perhaps a little bit of humble bragging about one's extensive knowledge of rare tea varietals. The guest list was exclusive, and the unspoken rule was clear: if you weren't sipping the best, you weren't worth the invite. tea etiquette at these gatherings was a minefield of social faux pas just waiting to happen. Take, for example, the 3 nods rule. This was a gesture of respect and thanks to the person serving the tea, which, if done incorrectly, could be as socially disastrous as mispronouncing a designer brand at a fashion show. Then there was the art of silent sipping, a practice that demanded complete silence while drinking, lest one offend the delicate sensibilities of the host or, heaven forbid, distract from the profound conversations happening around the table. These rituals weren't just about showing off one's sophistication. They were a microcosm of the Song dynasty's social hierarchies. The way you sipped your tea was a reflection of your understanding of Confucian values, a demonstration of your place within the social ladder. In a society where appearances mattered immensely, mastering these subtleties was as important as wearing the right silk robe to the party. And don't even get me started on the tea itself. The elite weren't just drinking any old leaf. No, they were sampling teas with names as intricate as their flavours: White Cloud Dragon, Golden Lion Mountain, and the illustrious monkey-picked oolong, which, as legend has it, was harvested by trained monkeys, though it's more likely the monkeys were a clever marketing ploy to jack up prices. But while the elite were busy playing tea connoisseurs, the common folks had their own tea culture brewing. For them, tea wasn't about exclusivity or status, it was about community and comfort, a warm cup shared with family, friends, and neighbours. Tea houses were the epicentres of this everyday culture, bustling with the chatter of merchants, labourers, and scholars. They were the great equalisers, places where social barriers were temporarily dissolved in a shared appreciation for a good brew. The etiquette here was far more relaxed, though not devoid of its own set of unspoken rules. For instance, it was considered polite to pour tea for others before serving yourself. A simple gesture, yet one that reinforced the importance of community and mutual respect. And while the elite might have turned tea drinking into an art form, common folks were content with keeping it practical. No silent sipping here, just good conversation and perhaps a game of Chinese chess on the side. Tea, in all its forms, was a social glue that held together the fabric of Song society. It was the medium through which relationships were forged and strengthened, a catalyst for everything from business deals to budding romances. Whether in the opulent halls of the elite or the bustling tea houses of the commoners, tea was a constant presence, a reminder of the shared human experience. So, there you have it, a peek into the world of Song dynasty tea culture, where every sip was steeped in tradition and every gathering was a dance of social intricacies. As we continue to unravel this tale, remember that the story of tea is not just about the drink itself, but about the people who drank it and the society it shaped. Stay tuned, because there's still much more to explore in this saga of leaves and lives. And speaking of leaves and lives, let's spill the tea on the Song dynasty's artistic scene, where caffeinated creativity knew no bounds. If you think caffeine-fueled brainstorming sessions are a modern invention, think again. The Song era was abuzz with intellectuals and artists who made tea their muse, or at least a handy excuse for a writer's block breakthrough. While we might romanticize the notion of great art being born from the delicate aroma of a freshly brewed cup, the reality was often more mundane. Tea was the Red Bull of its day, keeping bleary-eyed scholars awake during endless bureaucratic meetings. Let's paint a picture, literally. Tea-inspired art wasn't just about capturing the beauty of the leaves, but also the societal significance steeped in every cup. Tea poetry, known as sha, became a genre in its own right. This wasn't just a poetic nod to a beloved beverage, but an exploration of life's deeper truths. Take Lu Tong, an esteemed poet of the time, who penned 7 bowls of tea. Each cup in this poem represents a stage of enlightenment, a journey from worldly concerns to transcendent wisdom. A nice thought, but perhaps also a poetic way to justify multiple refills. But before we get too starry-eyed about poetry's profundity, let's not forget that for many, these verses were as much about impressing patrons as they were about artistic expression. With the Song's burgeoning tea culture, a well-crafted tea poem could be your golden ticket to social elevation. Call it a medieval LinkedIn endorsement if you will. Got a knack for rhyming about your favourite brew? You might just find yourself invited to the next elite tea soiree. Now, on to the visual arts. Tea painting emerged as a popular form of expression, with artists capturing the essence of tea gatherings, tea preparation, and even the simple beauty of the tea plant itself. These works were less about showcasing technical prowess and more about encapsulating the ethos of tea culture. One famous example is the Song Dynasty artist Zhao Ji, also known as Emperor Huizong, whose painting Tea Leaves demonstrated his dual passion for art and tea. The artwork wasn't just about aesthetics. It was a subtle display of cultural sophistication, an emperor flexing his cultural muscles. But before you start picturing serene artists in lotus position, brush in one hand and tea bowl in the other, remember that the artistic process wasn't always as tranquil as the results. The reality was often a rush to meet deadlines and please patrons. And speaking of deadlines, tea had another practical use. It kept insomniac artists burning the midnight oil. Just swap out today's energy drinks for a steaming cup of Dragonwell, and you've got the medieval equivalent of a Red Bull-fueled all-nighter. While tea art and poetry were beloved, they weren't purely about the pursuit of beauty. Many artworks served as subtle critiques of contemporary society or as a means of political commentary. For instance, tea-themed paintings might not just celebrate the drink, but also comment on the social hierarchies it reinforced. Art, in this sense, became a silent protest, a way to critique the system without uttering a single word. Tea also left its mark on the more tangible aspects of culture, the art of calligraphy. The elegant brushstrokes found in tea poems were no happy accident. They reflected the artistry and discipline of their creators, who often practiced calligraphy as a meditative ritual, their brushes gliding over the paper as smoothly as a sip of fine oolong down the throat. The aesthetic of the written word was just as important as its meaning, a testament to the Song people's dedication to beauty in all things. Yet, it wasn't all about high art. Tea also inspired more utilitarian creations. Teawares, for example, were crafted with as much care as the art they inspired. The Song dynasty was particularly famous for its Jangware bowls, designed to enhance the tea-drinking experience. These bowls, often dark and simple, allowed the vibrant colours of the tea's froth to stand out, a lesson in form following function, if ever there was one. But let's not kid ourselves. The romanticised image of tea driving high art often overlooks the more mundane motivations. Sure, some artists found genuine inspiration in their daily brew, but for many, tea was a means to an end, staying alert, impressing the right people, or simply getting through another day in the Song dynasty's demanding cultural landscape. And while we're on the subject of harsh realities, consider the economic backdrop. The flourishing trade network that made tea ubiquitous also made it a lucrative commodity. Artists and poets often found themselves at the mercy of wealthy patrons who expected their commissions to reflect not just artistic talent, but also economic astuteness. Your latest tea-themed masterpiece could easily end up as a bargaining chip in a trade negotiation, its value determined by market demands as much as artistic merit. So, while it's tempting to envision a world where every artist was a free spirit, driven solely by passion and a love of tea, the truth was far more transactional. Art and commerce were as intertwined as the leaves in a tea bag, each dependent on the other for survival in the vibrant, bustling world of the Song dynasty. In the end, the artistic and cultural impact of tea during the Song dynasty was as complex and layered as the flavours of the brews themselves. It was a time when art and life were inextricably linked, each influencing the other in a continual dance of creation and consumption. As we continue to explore the intricate world of Song dynasty tea culture, remember that every sip of history is a blend of myth and reality, a reminder that even the simplest pleasures carry with them the weight of ages. Stay tuned as we uncover more of this rich tapestry, where every cup tells a story. As we sip from the historical cup of Song dynasty tea culture, let's turn our gaze to the ingenious technological advancements that brewed alongside the tea craze. Spoiler alert, this wasn't just about fancy leaves, it was about changing the game. Picture this. The Song dynasty's answer to Silicon Valley wasn't churning out apps, but teapots and powdered tea that got the empire buzzing with excitement, envy, and a fair dose of chaos. First up, let's talk teapots. Back then, the development of specialized teapots was akin to the release of a new smartphone today. Everyone wanted the latest model, and these weren't your run-of-the-mill kettles. The Song dynasty artisans crafted teapots with the precision of watchmakers, using materials like porcelain and clay, each choice affecting the brew's flavor profile. The famed Yixing teapots made from purple clay were the Rolls-Royce of their day, gaining a reputation for enhancing the aroma and taste of tea. It was believed that the porous nature of the clay allowed the teapot to absorb the essence of the tea, getting better with each brew. Imagine a gadget that improved the more you used it, pure marketing genius. But wait, there's more. The Song era also saw the invention of powdered tea, a precursor to the Japanese tea ceremony's matcha. This innovation was the brainchild of Lu Yu, the sage of tea, whose seminal book, The Classic of Tea, became the industry's Bible. By pulverizing steamed tea leaves into a fine powder, enthusiasts could whisk up a frothy brew in ceramic bowls, akin to the difference between a drip coffee and an espresso shot today. This powdered form wasn't just about convenience, it was about elevating the experience, turning tea drinking into an art form. And let's not forget the economic implications. Powdered tea was a lucrative product, fetching prices that could rival other luxury goods of the time. These advancements stirred up a whirlwind of enthusiasm and, yes, a little chaos. Just like today's tech enthusiasts lining up for the latest gadget, medieval tea aficionados clamored for the newest innovations. The elite wanted teapots that signaled their status, while the masses embraced powdered tea for its accessibility and flair. The demand for these items spurred an entire industry of artisans and merchants, each vying for a slice of the lucrative tea market. The Song dynasty was a melting pot of creativity, where the next big thing was always just around the corner, or in this case, in the next batch of tea leaves. Now, if you think this was all smooth sailing, think again. With innovation came competition, and with competition came counterfeits. Shoddy replicas of Yixing teapots flooded the market, much like the knockoff handbags that line today's street markets. Consumers had to be savvy, lest they end up with a dud that wouldn't brew a proper cup even if their lives depended on it. The pressure was on for merchants to prove the authenticity of their wares, sometimes resorting to elaborate displays and demonstrations to convince skeptical buyers. And let's not overlook the social impact. These technological strides democratized tea culture to an extent, breaking down some of the barriers between the elite and common folk. While the wealthy flaunted their bespoke teapots at grand gatherings, everyday people found joy in the simple act of whisking powdered tea, turning even the humblest kitchen into a stage for this new, vibrant tea art. It was a rare instance where innovation bridged the gap between classes, albeit temporarily. But before we get too misty-eyed about the egalitarian promise of powdered tea, let's remember that not everyone was thrilled. The traditionalists clung to their old ways, viewing these innovations as unnecessary fripperies that distracted from the true essence of tea. To them, the ritual was what mattered, not the tools or trends. Their resistance was a reminder that with every leap forward, there's always a tug to hold on to what came before. Ultimately, the story of Song Dynasty tea technology is a tale as complex as the flavors it helped create. It was an era where creativity met commerce, where the desire for novelty drove both innovation and imitation. As we continue our journey through this caffeinated chapter of history, remember, every sip of tea has a story, one that echoes through time with the clink of 1,000 teacups. Stay tuned, because the kettle's still on, and there's a lot more to pour out about how this little leaf left an indelible mark on society, shaping not just how people drank tea, but how they lived, worked, and dreamed in the bustling, vibrant world of the Song Dynasty. As the kettle whistles on our historical journey, let's pour ourselves a cup of diplomacy, Song Dynasty style. Now, if you're picturing tea as a quaint tool for peace, much like a warm hug in a cup, brace yourself. The reality was a bit more Game of Thrones than Little House on the Prairie. During the Song Dynasty, tea wasn't just a matter of national pride, it was a diplomatic juggernaut. Imagine having a commodity so powerful that it could dictate international relations. Tea was the ace up the Song Dynasty's sleeve, a tool for forging alliances and, occasionally, for stirring up a diplomatic storm. The Song emperors, always the shrewd negotiators, understood that a well-placed gift of tea could be as persuasive as any treaty signed under duress. Let's start with the Khitans of the Liao dynasty. These neighbors to the north had a taste for Song tea that rivaled their appetite for power. The Song government, recognizing this, used tea as a key bargaining chip. In exchange for peace and stability along their northern borders, the Song sent substantial amounts of tea to the Liao, a move that was as strategic as it was aromatic. But don't be fooled into thinking this was all about creating harmony. The Song were well aware that the Khitans' reliance on their tea was a leash of sorts, a subtle means of control in the grand game of diplomacy. Yet, the Song didn't just use tea to placate their neighbours. The commodity also played a part in their relations with the Tunguts of the Western Shire. Here, tea was part of a broader trade strategy, often exchanged for horses, vital assets for the Song's military. Talk about a horse of a different colour. While modern trade negotiations might revolve around complex financial instruments, back then it was all about the right blend of leaves for the right breed of stallion. And, yes, the stakes were high. Without these horses, the Song military might have found itself as effective as a Night Sand steed. But wait, there's more. The Mongols, who were looming on the horizon, also had their eyes on the prize. They knew the power of tea, both as a beverage and a bargaining tool. When Genghis Khan and his successors swept across Asia like a caffeine-fueled whirlwind, they too recognized tea's strategic value. The Mongol rulers were no strangers to using tea as a diplomatic gift, cementing alliances with far-flung partners and ensuring their empire ran as smoothly as a well-oiled tea machine. Of course, not every tea-based negotiation ended in a peaceful resolution. The Song dynasty's reliance on tea as a diplomatic tool also sowed the seeds of conflict. As the demand for tea soared, so did tensions over control of the lucrative trade routes. The Song's southern neighbours, the Southern Song dynasty, and their rivals, the Jin dynasty, frequently clashed over these pathways, much like two siblings fighting over the last cookie in the jar. These tea-driven skirmishes were as much about economic control as they were about political dominance. While tea was hailed as a symbol of peace and prosperity, its role in these conflicts reveals a more bitter truth. The Song dynasty's reliance on tea diplomacy was a double-edged sword, one that could cut both ways. On one hand, it facilitated alliances and fostered trade relationships. On the other, it fueled rivalries and economic power plays that could erupt into full-blown wars. Tea, it seems, was as capable of dividing as it was of uniting. This dichotomy between tea's peaceful image and its reality as a catalyst for conflict is a lesson in the complexities of international relations. It's a reminder that even the most benign-seeming commodities can become points of contention when their economic value is put to the test. Tea, like any other resource, was both a blessing and a curse, a tool for diplomacy and a trigger for discord. Fast forward to today, and you'll find that the story hasn't changed all that much. Whether it's oil in the Middle East or rare earth minerals in Africa, the commodities may have changed, but the game remains the same. Nations continue to use resources to wield influence, forge alliances, and, when necessary, flex their muscles. The Song dynasty's tea diplomacy serves as a historical echo of our present-day geopolitical landscape, where the stakes are as high as ever and the players are just as shrewd. So, what's the takeaway from our caffeinated journey through the corridors of power? It's that tea, in all its forms, was far more than just a drink. It was a diplomatic tool, an economic powerhouse, and a symbol of both unity and division. The Song dynasty's legacy of tea culture is a testament to the enduring power of simple pleasures and the surprising ways they can shape history. As we wrap up this historical brew, let's remember that every cup of tea carries with it the weight of centuries, a blend of myth and reality that continues to influence the world today. Whether you're sipping a steaming chai or savouring a delicate jasmine, you're part of a tradition that spans continents and centuries, a story as rich and complex as the leaves themselves. So here's to tea, the drink that changed the world, one cup at a time.